Welcome to My Worst Memory, a workplace safe space podcast. I'm your host, Robin Cohen, founder of Happier Office and operations executive. Each episode, I sit down with some of the best in the business to talk about some of their worst professional memories. Together, we dissect corporate culture, scaling snafus, leadership techniques, and all the awful in between that we've lived through, so hopefully you don't have to. Today's guest is Demi Tsasis. Hi, Demi. How are you?
Hi. I'm great. How are you?
Good. I'm so happy you're here. She's the owner of Product Growth Coach, a boutique business coaching and marketing agency. Prior to owning her own business, Demi spent the decade growing and scaling major Silicon Valley brands, including AllTrails, Under Armour, and MyFitnessPal. Now, Demi, that is a wide breadth of experience. Did you know that you always wanted to go in the product direction and owning your own business?
Absolutely not. I thought that I was going to make music videos and be an indie filmmaker. I actually went to school for media production and was focused on a path of directing and producing. But I graduated in 2008 when the housing market and the job market both crashed, and I needed to find a way to use the skills that I had just learned to make consistent money, and I fell into marketing. That marketing path took me eventually to MyFitnessPal, and that's when I discovered product. And I really fell in love with all of it, how much you have to lean into the customer, how much you need to understand what motivates people and what they're looking for in terms of value. So I clawed my way into product, and I've been doing that for about a decade.
Nice. And we'll hear a little bit more about that, the clawing, spoiler alert, for something tied to one of your memories. But that's a very different path. I'm finding everyone I talk to, it's not like they woke up saying, hey, I want to work in operations, I want to work in product or marketing. It's we all kind of found these paths a little more organically.
I mean, product didn't even exist yet when I was going through school. So it was not a clear-cut pathway. So it came to be as my career was progressing.
Do you think you'll ever get back to making videos?
Yeah, I actually still do that on the side as part of what I do for fun. I've just got a lot of plates I'm spinning right now that I'm prioritizing, but that will always hold a special place for me.
You mentioned prioritizing, which makes me think about just corporate jargon and phrasing. I don't think I've heard prioritization so much as I have at any sort of a conference with product or marketing folks. So do you have a phrase that maybe is your most hated corporate jargon?
My most hated corporate jargon is let's circle back to that.
It's the worst.
I'm
Tell me why.
Can we just make a decision? Can we just have the conversation? Because we're just delaying.
Yes.
And you know how it is in startup culture where time is of the essence. We are trying to make strides and every week matters, especially when you grow and there starts to be friction or a little bit of fear that creeps in to the employees. You start to find a little bit of resistance to decision making, and circling back starts to become a more and more used phrase.
More often than not, that phrase, circle back, is almost a placating term that folks use to push off conversations as well. Have you ever circled back? Has anyone ever actually followed back up?
Typically, what it comes down to is a fear around having the communication, especially as your organization grows and there is more likely to be some of that old guard, new guard tension. And you see this being a pattern. You have to start thinking from a leadership perspective, why are we losing velocity? Why aren't people making these decisions? Are we not creating a culture where we encourage failure?
Sure. Or is it just that they don't know how to communicate with these new folks, right? I just worked with a company, I hosted an offsite for them, and it was exactly what you're describing, old guard versus new guard, this kind of complacency and comfort in what has always been versus the new folks coming in were really looking to move and make change. And they were meeting so much friction. And a lot of it just came down to not knowing how to speak the same language. And it seems silly, right? We think about it a lot when it comes to cultural differences if you're working with an international team. But these people are all based in the same state. They have very similar backgrounds, very similar industry experience, and yet they still needed a reminder on foundations of basic communication.
Sometimes it's just literally you need to take the time to build the relationships, and that takes the cheesy things, the icebreakers, asking each other questions, and then you start to humanize each other and understand that you are there to support one another in a shared goal.
While it's business, it feels personal, right? Oftentimes when new people come in, they're questioning what's already there. They're asking, can we change things? And that can feel very personal for folks. But assuming good intent, right? That's what I try to teach folks is assuming good intent. We're all just trying to make this better and work towards the goal of growing our team, growing our culture, growing our company. And you can't do that without a little bit of discomfort.
I'm a big proponent of direct communication, and discomfort is not a bad thing, right? If you don't feel a little bit of discomfort when you're doing something, you're not growing. You're not challenging yourself. You're not challenging your team. And that can actually create a lack of confidence over time.
The healthy conversation you're describing really comes down to having mutual trust and confidence in the system to support and hold those conversations. But when you don't have that, and say you work in an organization that is a little bit more rigid or less connected, I think what you're saying is there's still opportunity to build that. And the ways that we do that is when we go into a conversation, we say, hey, I know traditionally this is how we've done things. For the sake of this meeting, let's try to level set and think about it in a new way. It's possible to slowly shift, because I think some of our listeners will not be in that ideal situation. I would say most folks are not in that ideal, perfectly humming team.
It's true. And that's why you have to take it upon yourself to do some of that work sometimes. You know, when it comes to building trust, there may be a culture that does not nurture that. You're going to have to do that on your own. I've definitely worked at larger organizations. Yeah, and you have to understand, if you can't get that support from your senior leader, you can typically find an ally somewhere. And if you can't, and it's rough, you should start thinking to yourself, okay, what's my exit plan? Because sometimes it's not compatible with your personality and with the way that you want to work. If at the heart of it, the way that the culture works is not aligned with how you work, it's going to chip away at you.
If your culture and your values don't align with the corporate values of where you're working, that's the time, or could be a time to leave. Because I think what many people think of when they think of their worst memories are these super toxic workplaces or terrible managers. But what you're describing is also just a misalignment of what's important to you. You could be working with lovely people, but if the company is not on the same page, or they're doing things that go against how you believe the world should function, you're only going to have a certain level of happiness that you can achieve within that role.
And also, you're going to start to ask yourself questions about why am I allowing this, right? Why am I putting up with this? And you start to question your morals and, you know, your standards, your values. So to me, those are cues that you have a misalignment. And even if you're working with lovely people, there's going to be some deal breakers in there for you, inevitably.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of a company in particular I worked at many, many years ago. Some of my best friends to this day are from that company, but we are all sort of bonded through the trauma. It wasn't necessarily a place that any of us should have stayed. It's, you know, when you're in it, you can't see it, and then you get out of it and you go, oh man, this had a lot to unpack. But that being said, you know, it's a learning experience. And depending at that stage in my career, I was young and I didn't know that it wasn't a totally okay situation to be in. I feel like we all make accommodations before we have better context.
You don't know what you don't know. And, you know, you just can't bank on some, you know, showing up day one and somebody being like, here are all the secrets. This is how it works. It's gonna go honky-dory. They, of course, want you to do well. That's why they hired you. They need you to do well. But they may not be in a position to have the time to train you, to guide you, to nurture you. Yes. So if you can't find that with peers, if you can't find that even in, say, somebody in a different department that understands and can, at least the company and the culture, look outside.
Switching gears a little bit, just in making sure we are tackling that big question everyone wants to know the answer to. When you think back on your career, what is your worst professional memory?
Well, my worst professional memory was how hard it was to actually break into product. I came into MyFitnessPal.
Set the stage. How large was the company at this point?
There was like 30 people.
Okay, so no product team.
No product team quite yet. You know, the founders were doing a lot of heavy lifting still. And what I realized was how much I just really loved doing that work. It was problem solving. It was psychology. It was pattern recognition. All the things that make my brain happy.
Yeah.
And so I found opportunities where I could, by building relationships and putting my hand up for projects so that I could get to a place where I was getting exposed to and working on more what would be traditional product related work.
Okay.
So that was going really well. And then we were acquired by Under Armour. Really big company.
How long
Go ahead.
after the raise did that happen?
About 2 years.
But you'd been with MyFitnessPal for a while. You were pretty established
Yeah, it
within
had been
that
a beat.
organization. Okay.
So we got acquired by Under Armour. They kind of went on a little bit of a shopping spree and purchased a few apps around the same time. So,
This is the Under Armour, the apparel brand for folks
Yes,
who don't know.
yes.
Okay. Yep.
So, of course, that's not something that they had in their repertoire. So trying to explain to them, hey, I would love to be over in this other organization. Now you're in a big corporate environment. So there was a lot of friction. And there was just a lack of understanding that a lot of the roles and a lot of the work that I was doing was actually product work.
But they didn't know because they were retail people.
Exactly.
Realistically.
And the people that I was working with within my organization were marketing people. And they also didn't have exposure in their background to tech marketing to understand that's not exactly what we do on a day-to-day.
So they didn't really know what to do with you? Was this when product was still kind of new?
Product was still kind of new, and I felt like I didn't have enough experience with product to be able to go somewhere else. I hadn't had a title that said product to be able to go somewhere else. So around this time, Under Armour had hired a new VP of product for MyFitnessPal. And as we got to know each other, I explained to him what I had been doing, and he asked me some questions. And after a couple of months, he was like, what the hell are you doing in marketing? We need to make some moves.
And how long had you been trying to champion the same thing before this new leader arrived?
Oh, like a year.
So it was a year of you being like, hello, I'm a product person. Hello, I'm a product person.
It was more I would like to please be a product person. There was a little bit of a lack of confidence there because I didn't have the experience and I didn't feel like I could push for it. You're in a big corporation now. It's not exactly like I can go walk down the hallway and have a conversation with someone. There's somebody I don't really know many states away that's making these decisions. So it changes things.
So you were still MyFitnessPal, but you were just absorbed by Under Armour. All of a sudden had a bunch of layers on top of you, I imagine, of management.
And multiple apps. It was a crazy time. There was a lot of change going on. And there was a learning curve for Under Armour in terms of now having a bunch of apps. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
So I found my advocate. I found somebody that saw my value. I showed them my skill set. I proved myself to them through work and conversations, and they chose to put their effort into being able to make that happen for me. And it was difficult because he had to, first of all, ensure that the leadership in marketing were willing to let me go to product because I was doing a lot of things and they were going to have to figure out how to do those without me.
Yeah.
So we got to an agreement where there would be a period of time where I would kind of be split in half and I would do half marketing and half product.
Okay.
Unfortunately, again, because of the naivete there, they were like, this is a lateral move. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And luckily I had an advocate in that VP. And
I was about to say, this doesn't sound that bad, right? You found a guy.
Doesn't sound that bad. I'm like, cool, I did it. And then I found out, oh, my peers are actually making 50% more than me. Even people that had less experience, associates coming in, were making more than me.
Whoa.
My VP was like, this is not right, period, full stop. And it, again, now it's not a 30-person scrappy, hey, this is the right thing to do, quick conversation with a C-suite and making sure we have budget. It is now, okay, we have to go into this big corporate process. And fill out a bunch of paperwork, make arguments, etc.
Just now you paid what you deserve.
Correct. It took another couple months and then it was an agreeing to a date. But if it wasn't for that VP, I would never have gotten the product role and I would have never understood what I should see my value as. They not just built up my confidence in helping me understand that I have the product chops. It was also, I'm not going to settle for you not getting what you deserve.
Yeah, which that's just a good human. What year was this? Did this predate Gallery.com or Glassdoor? All
Oh,
of
yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Glassdoor might have been starting, but it really wasn't focused on tech yet. The only way you found out was somebody would literally have to tell you what their salary was for you to know. And that was
Not
still
common.
on the taboo side.
Yeah.
And so once I started to understand, oh, this is actually the rate that is what I should be seeking, I realized, oh my gosh, I thought I was doing really good these last few years, how much money I was making. Once I had this experience, it made me realize either I set my value or somebody else does. And I'm never going to let somebody else set my value again.
So how long did that take from start to finish of when you realized I'm doing product work, I want to be in product, to when the change occurred?
It was like a year and a half.
Wow. And you had already been with the company for a few years prior to that.
Yeah, a couple years.
So you had to have a lot of patience. Man,
Yeah.
why didn't you leave?
I loved the people I was working with. They were great. And I loved the product. We were helping people make healthier decisions, live healthier lives. And that really mattered to me. So, of course, I don't want to leave. And it was a time when all the advice was, if you want to get into product, you kind of squirrel your way in. That's how you do it. You go somewhere early enough that you can pivot, or you prove yourself to have the skill set and shoot your shot.
Well, that's the thing that's always been so frustrating for me when I talk with folks that are, they're trying to switch industries, or they want to change direction like you did from marketing to product or product to engineering, and they go to interview after interview and they're hearing, well, you don't have the experience. But they're never going to get the experience if they're not able to make that adjustment. So you're in this interesting spot where you're getting the experience, but you don't have the job title yet, and you don't have the pay. So I imagine that would make leaving also challenging.
If I wanted to leave, I'm going to have to do marketing. That's what's on my resume. It's going to be very challenging to go anywhere other than a seed stage startup and hope I still have a job in 6 months to get a crack at product. I was
to start
at a company
again.
that had got acquired, was owned by a Fortune 500 company. I was doing good for what I thought. I had no, idea that I was being underpaid at that point. Why would I not put the effort in here? And I can at least have some use cases that I can leverage when I'm talking about myself externally.
Yeah.
I can't say with certainty that was the smartest decision for me to make. I needed to feed myself and keep a roof over my head, and I was able to do that and save. So I was like, this is fine.
Yeah.
If things were different, I probably would have made a different decision. But I was like, I'm sticking it out. It took longer than I wanted it to. I was feeling deflated. And that's why I was kind of willing to shoot my shot when that new VP started. I was like, well, who cares? What, am I going to get in trouble by my boss?
You talk so much about, and you, I think, exemplify this in the story, being an active participant in your own growth. If you didn't put in the work and have the conversations, build the relationships, advocate for yourself over and over again, you likely would still be in marketing to this day. Yeah. Or you would have had to start all over at a different startup. But what I wonder is, you talked about having these nice coworkers, and then you had this new VP that came in that was really an advocate for you. What is the difference? How would you explain to our listeners the difference between someone who's nice and someone who's an advocate?
Someone
and an ally,
nice.
Right? They're different.
Yes.
They're all a little nuanced.
Absolutely. So somebody that's nice is somebody that has morals, right? They know how to be kind. They say please and thank you. They don't demand things. Somebody that's your advocate goes further. They say, I see your value and I want to make sure other people see your value, and I will put my reputation on the line to build yours.
Yeah. I'll introduce you to someone. I'll fight the fight for you.
I'll vouch for you. I'm going to push. I'm going to find opportunities for you to grow. How do I nurture this person to build their skill set, build their confidence, so that they can increase the amount of value that they provide to this company? And And
it's good for them, but it's also good for the business, right? It was good for that VP to get you on board. You were going to be more productive. You would work harder for them after they fought for you. Not that was the reason.
So, yeah, but it's also like, if you want it that bad, they know you're going to bust your butt, right? Yeah. Like, you finally got the opportunity you've been working so hard for. You're going to make everybody else have to hustle a little harder with how hard you go.
Good on that person, too, for not looking at your current salary and going, oh, we can get them for a steal. No, it's I'm going to bring you up to market because that's what you deserve because they're a human that has integrity.
Yes. And this was at a time when there was a lot of conversation around inequality in pay, especially for women. So to me, it was really powerful to have somebody do that because it also showed me an example of how to do that for myself, right?
Or for your future direct reports too.
Absolutely. And it showed me just because senior leadership says no doesn't mean you just go, okay, and turn around and tell your employees, sorry, the big boss said no. There is more than one way to go about that.
People don't realize the power. If you have the leadership team's ear or you're in someone's good favor, you have the power to drastically impact someone else's career trajectory. And that could be as simple as giving a manager feedback on an employee that you worked with that did an amazing job. It costs you nothing but a little bit of time, but that could actually push that person to the next level in their career. And of course, it could go conversely the other way. However, if you're assuming people are operating from a place of good intent, like you can make a difference in people's lives.
Thinking this through in terms of like peer allyship, it's the little thing. When you're in the meeting and somebody says, that was that person's idea, or I couldn't have done this without the support of these other people. It's being willing to champion each other and light up the work when you're not in the room, right? How do those people talk about you when you're not there?
Or do they talk about you?
Or do they? Having somebody that's going to be that cheerleader, both when you're in the room and when you're not, that's an ally. That's a peer ally.
Yeah. In marketing, it's so cross-functional. And if you did not have allies across different teams, you weren't getting anything done, right?
No, because it goes into those conversations we talked about earlier where all you're going to hear is let's circle back, right? But nothing gets done.
Nothing gets done. But if, you know what, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday and a fire drill comes in, again, it should not be done from a place that's self-serving. But if you have that relationship, that friendship, whatever it is, that person will probably stay 5 minutes late to get you that asset or to connect you to that person. And I think there's power in lifting each other up. This is something I was talking about with another one of our guests, lifting each other up. Assuming, again, that it's not a super toxic workplace and weird competition, which I've talked about with different guests on this show, it helps everybody out, right? It helps the company, it helps your peer, it makes you look good because you're referring someone who is capable. You mentioned this idea of really advocating for yourself. And I think that is a theme that's like clear throughout all of this, that you had to really bust your butt to try and get people to hear you, right? Yeah. And that can be exhausting. And it took years, but ultimately was a bit years, which I'm still like not over that. But I think it's super relatable, right? And many people would have given up, but there's this concept of, self-advocacy that is so important. And to the point that, an MIT researcher studied almost 500 Fortune 100 employees. And they found that those who were able to advocate for themselves, and the way they assess that, I'll explain in a minute, but they were 12% more likely to advance into leadership roles than folks in the control peer. And so the way they tested that was they enrolled all these folks in debate training, basically, because what they figured was if you're able to debate someone, you can state your position clearly, you can advocate for yourself, you can counter, like you were saying, if a leadership team member says no, you could say, actually, here's an alternative. So being able to have the confidence and motivation and ability to communicate confidently will directly, positively impact your career trajectory. If you're in a place where maybe you don't know how to advocate for yourself, if you're one of our listeners who maybe is a little more junior in your career or has been fortunate enough to never have had to fight for your seat at the table and you're looking to improve your skills, sign up for a debate class, do some theater training, do anything that will kind of help boost your confidence and give you the skills that you need to really communicate better and more effectively.
I love it. Take an improv class.
Yes,
Toastmasters is good. A coworker of mine, also during the MyFitnessPal era, she was having a lot of trouble speaking up in meetings and advocating for herself, and she was getting feedback that it was holding her back. It was causing a perception to occur that was not aligned with her, right? So it's like, oh, well, she never says anything. She doesn't have any opinion. She just had a hard time.
She's probably checked out. She probably doesn't know.
But she had a lot of opinions and a lot of thoughts. She just wasn't comfortable sharing them in a group setting.
Which that
she
to
did
me
a
has a
Toastmasters.
whole. Sorry, continue. And
There's
then
a
I will
whole
go
thing.
on my side tangent. There's a whole side tangent there, but continue. So she did Toastmasters.
But she did Toastmasters, and then she let us, her peers, that we were allies of hers, know that she was doing that, ask for accountability, and she was able to make a lot of progress. The thing that was really a hang up for her was challenging somebody senior to her that had a different opinion than her. But she knew, based on data that we had and her instinct of having done her work for so long, that it was the wrong decision to make. And she finally got to a place where she was willing to have those conversations. She wasn't stammering or turning beet red or, closing herself off. So yeah, get into improv, get into a Toastmasters, find whatever it is that'll work for you. You may have different hangups, but the cool thing is in 2025, you can hit up ChatGPT and they'll probably give you a lot of great ideas on what to do with just a little bit of prompting.
It's true. I have separate thoughts about robots taking over the world that I won't get into with ChatGPT, but I do think what is really wonderful about something you can't, or maybe you can get this from a computer, I don't know, is simulating that discomfort, right? It's almost exposure therapy. So I think the reason that these programs work or debate training work is because you are putting yourself in the position where your heart rate rises, you're forced to talk over the stuttering and the awkward fidgeting and until you get to a place where you realize this isn't actually scary. My body wants to think it's scary. That fight or flight response thinks it's terrifying. But really, I'm just talking to another human. I'm not being chased by a lion. I can do this. I can use data and tell them what I think. I can explain my point. But I think that what you brought up about your coworker before they took the training, right? So the perception that they were maybe less engaged or less intelligent or less capable because of their reserved demeanor, I think is something that as managers, we have to really work not only to give them that feedback to help advocate for them, make sure they're getting opportunity to address that, but also to be able to create spaces where folks don't have to give feedback only in one way, right? We all have different learning styles. We all have different communication styles. People should be able, like you said, to have the time to process and give feedback. They should be able to follow up. Unless it's really, a 911 situation, there's no reason that things have to be that urgent. And if you have teammates who are a little maybe less active or less engaged, I think it's a good question to start to ask of, okay, are they disengaged or are they maybe just a little socially awkward? Are they lacking in confidence in what they're trying to speak about?
Or are they just still analyzing it? Are they still thinking it through? Because not everybody is wired to make bam decisions on the snap of a finger, right? That is the balance and you need that, right? I need the yin to my yang. But you also need to create a culture where you encourage that type of friction, that type of discomfort, and that you nurture the healthy way to work through that. The rules of debate where you let everybody have their time. You create space for challenge. That's literally the point. Because a lot of people, let's face it, their examples were just whoever yells loudest wins the argument, right?
Right.
I want to circle back to something you said that I think is super important, exposure therapy. You can read as many books as you want. You can watch all the TED Talks you want, all the YouTube videos you want. You have to walk the walk. Absolutely. You have to go through it. You have to feel your heartbeat in your face, feel your entire body get hot, have that fight or flight moment and understand how do you trust yourself through the fear. You can't do that work without having that feeling, without going through those situations.
It's not about going into a meeting and just being combative to be combative to simulate that heart race. It should be done in a very intentional and purposeful way for the common good of whatever you're trying to achieve. But that being said, you don't have to do it alone either, right? No. If you're listening to this and you're kind of feel like your stomach's in your throat and the idea of having to go have this conversation makes you want to throw up, if you have a good relationship with your manager or a peer ally or a manager on a different team, bring that up and say, hey, I noticed that I'm really uncomfortable with conflict. It's something that I'm working on. Do you have any suggestions for me, or can you help me find situations in which I can push myself to grow? Because like you were saying, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. And that's fine if you're in a state of stasis, but if you are wanting to advance, if you're wanting to strengthen a certain muscle that you don't have, it has to get a little uncomfortable and tired from practice.
Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit. So
let's go.
I'm wondering, for the folks who maybe are finding themselves a little stuck, like you were at MyFitnessPal, like it all played out well for you, but at some point, we all have to know whether it's time to cut the cord or not, right? What are those things that you look out for, whereas whether it is in a future job or in that current scenario where you can say, okay, now's the time, I gotta cut it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there.
Yeah.
And I've made that decision, and what it was that there was a negative impact on my life as a whole, right? So I had work I was doing that was the best work in my life, but I was just raw, right? As opposed to that role that we talked about earlier, I did not have the type of support and advocacy on the leadership team. So every day was an uphill battle. It didn't matter how much data I had, even having the other people advocate for me. Yes, I could move things forward, but everything was hard. And that was a constant. And I came to a place where I said, just as I would not stay in an unhealthy personal relationship, I can't stay in an unhealthy business relationship either. This is impacting my health, my mental wellness. The folks around me have seen a shift in how I am. I can't keep doing this. Yeah. And I made that decision for myself. And I said, you know what? I know that advocacy and support exists. I've had that. I'm going to advocate for myself and get on up out of here and find the next thing. And that requires courage. That requires trusting in your skill set. And that, quite frankly, kind of requires some privilege, right? Yeah, I had gotten to a place, can you save? Are you in a position where you cannot know what's next and still have a roof over your head and feed your family? I think it's important to acknowledge that.
You have to take control of your destiny. And with that in mind, I'd love to head over to the Watercooler for our topic today, which I'm calling Take It or Leave It. I'm going to read you a variety of scenarios, and I want to know, are you going to take it and put up with it, or are you going to leave it? So are you taking control of your destiny, or are you letting it ride? So the first one, you have autonomy to do your job, and you have support when you need it.
Take it.
Right? Who wouldn't want that? That sounds great.
Easy. That was an easy one.
Yeah, that was a warm-up. That was a softball.
That's a softball.
Yes. Oh, okay, the next one. Your manager supports you, but you know you are severely underpaid.
Oh, you went right to the fastball there.
Yep. It's a whiplash situation. We just talked about this for
a period of time.
Yes.
The correct answer is it depends.
Yes.
If you are able to leverage that opportunity and that manager is willing to support you through advocacy to get you what you should be getting paid, get you the title that you should have, stay. If your manager supports you in the way that we talked about, being kind, but not being an advocate, it's a dead end. Go.
Yeah. Go. Maybe see if you can find something else before you go.
That's always a given.
Have the ability.
Right?
I don't know. If it's really bad, sometimes you just got to cut the cord. So how about this one? Your job is challenging, but you are growing professionally, emotionally. You're able to save some money. Are you staying or leaving?
I'm staying. I want my job to be challenging.
Right? Just
if my job is boring, I'm checked out. I'm going to start to do a shitty job. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be looking for a challenge if I don't have it.
Yeah. Okay, next one. You are promised unlimited PTO and flex hours, but somehow you never get to actually get your PTO approved, and you're just working awful hours.
Is it because you don't ask for it or because they don't approve it?
Because they don't approve it.
I'm out.
Right?
Unlimited PTO is...
It's a scam. It's a scam, so people don't have to
I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute.
Mm-hmm,
okay?
Please do. Yes.
Unlimited PTO is there so that they don't have to pay you out your PTO when you leave.
Sure is.
Everybody young in their career. This shift happened about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. The Valley figured out we don't have to pay out if we just say it's unlimited. There's a loophole here. And so what used to happen was you accrue, and whatever you accrue, you keep. And if you're in a state like California, they can't take those hours away. So when you leave, when you separate, they have to pay those out. And so it was risk.
I had a teacher who retired 2 years early because he never took PTO, which was insane. I don't know how he managed that. But he retired 2 years early.
Yeah. And, so that is a liability on the books. And they were like, ooh, look, we can get millions in some cases of liability off of our books by just having unlimited PTO. Some places actually mean it. Okay. They will let you take however much you want. As long as your work gets done, do your thing.
Or if it's a special situation, like when I was at Wistia, we had unlimited PTO. I was able to take 3 weeks for my honeymoon. But I wasn't doing that every other week. It was once, and I was very mindful of not taking too much right before.
Yeah.
And
you know, the thing about unlimited PTO is it forces you to think about how you're going to take your breaks.
It's a scam.
First, I mean, I'm the type of person where I would like look up and be like, oh man, I literally haven't taken one day off in 3 quarters. And especially at a startup where everything's scrappy, you can get to a place where you feel like I can't step away for 2 days, let alone 2 weeks, and not have the whole world crash down. So do you even get to check out?
There will always be work. There will always be more work, is my perspective. The future. I was talking with another guest, John Beck, the VP of People at ButcherBox, and we had a similar conversation around asking those questions that are important to you. So if you value having the flexibility and having PTO, bring it up in an interview. Could you walk me through what it looks like when you're in busy season? But if you get there and you're finding that the way the company is structured does not align with your values, then maybe that's a sign. Maybe it's a sign it's time to go.
And manipulating your responses and starting to already give things up in advance that are important to you because of the fear of maybe losing out on the opportunity, that is a red flag. Red flag.
Well, Demi, thank you so much. It's fascinating hearing your perspective on navigating the world of everything that comes in a startup, being able to advocate for yourself, learning how to really grow in that area. I'm hoping is something that our listeners will take away from this too. And just being able to sort of be true to yourself. So just listen to your gut.
Absolutely. Your gut does not let you down. Your gut's just processing things faster than your brain. So just trust it.
Right. Which is also just a physiology fun fact, too. This is a very unrelated, but you can tell how healthy or well someone is based on how their digestive tract is working.
You have way more nerve endings in your guts than you do in your brains.
Body knows.
You know, your body knows. And like when you feel something in your gut, there has actually been studies done where the reason you have that physiological response is because you have so much subconsciously that is processing, and your gut is getting that response faster than your brain.
This is a different podcast now.
This is a different podcast. We'll have to have a different meeting for.
Come back for round 2 where Demi and I diagnose human physiology. Well,
it's fun.
Thank you. It is fun. Well, thank you so much again. This has been lovely, and I appreciate
Thank you, Robin. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I like to close out the episode with another corporate cliche of saying, my door is always open, so thanks for coming by, and I'll see you next time for My Worst Memory, a workplace safe space podcast. Bye.
Have a good one.